So it's my great pleasure to invite Mr. David Ehrlichman. David is the author of Impact Networks. He's going to talk about that shortly. He is a co-founder of Converge, and he helped many impact networks in all sorts of different social challenges. And he's going to talk about that shortly. Thank you, David, for joining us.
Hi everybody. Great to see you all. Thank you for coming. I'm so glad we have a pretty full room here, and this will be some great discussion. So I want to share not just why this work matters. I think we all understand that we need to be able to collaborate well, right, to actually address the problems that we face. But the how is different than we often think. It's definitely different than we often do. So my name is David Ehrlichman. I wrote Impact Networks. Please do take a copy. They're free and they've been signed if that means anything to you. But I've helped build over the past 15 years over 60 different impact networks around the world. These are multi-stakeholder, multi-organizational collaboratives that are addressing big issues that no single organization can on their own. So big issues like environmental stewardship or civic revitalization, labor and human rights in technology supply chains, access to science, all different kinds of things. And from these experiences, we saw that every network, every collaborative is different in terms of the different people, a different place and history and context and different issues that they're trying to address. But we also saw common patterns. There's a lot of similarities for the successful ones in terms of how they started and the role that funders played in them, the types of resources they needed, and the processes that were used to go from this scattered fragment of different organizations to a cohesive collective. So that's what I'm going to share with you here, and that's really what compelled me to write this book, is to share those patterns, to share the stories of the network leaders at the heart of these collaboratives, and those people are so often what make the difference. And to help others to have a guide for creating connections, sparking collaboration, and catalyzing systemic change. So let's get into it. What is a network? A network is simply a web of relationships connecting people or things. So networks are all around us. There are networks in our brains. There are technological networks like the internet. There are biological networks like the mycelial networks underneath forest floors that connect trees and plants together to communicate and share nutrients. It's amazing if you haven't discovered that. Then there are social networks. We all know about social networks. If you drew a line between yourself and every person you had a relationship with, and then a line between how they knew each other, it would look like this. We know about online social networks. Typically, your social networks, they form fairly organically as you meet new people, as you come into a new job and a new place. But what many people don't realize is that networks can do so much more than just foster connection. They can actually lead to shared learning, to information flow, to sharing resources, and to collaborative action. But we have to go about it deliberately and strategically. And that's what impact networks are. They are networks that are deliberately organized to bring people and organizations together for learning, collaborative action for a shared purpose. And there are all different types of examples of these really happening now all around the world, for now, in the past few decades and beyond. Just to highlight a couple, REAM brings over 130 organizations and 14 funders, 14 foundations to equitably reduce carbon emissions across 9 states in the Midwest. They've had huge success stopping any new coal plants from being built over the past 20 years, shutting down tons of existing coal plants, passing energy efficiency policies and transportation efficiency policies from the collective work. That was kind of one of the first examples 20 years ago. That was like the light bulb moment for me. Is like, oh my God, we can actually intentionally design these things, we can staff them, we can actually invest in the systemic infrastructure, not just in the individual organizations. Just to point out one more, 100 came 10, because they just reached their goal a couple years ago of training and supporting 100,000 high-quality STEM educators across the United States in 10 years, and they did it through a network approach. And when I say network approach, I mean, how can we increase our impact by scaling out through connections between organizations, building stronger systems, rather than just scaling up bigger and bigger organizations, which is where most of our focus tends to be. And of course, Jewish Funders Network, also an example of an impact network, increasing connection, learning, and action, among funders around Jewish issues through this conference, and also learning groups and geographically focused groups that they organize. So what I want to impress upon you here is that this is not some theoretical, experimental approach. This work is happening, it's making real impact, lots of different issues all over the world. Okay, so why, I don't want to hit this too hard because I think we already know. We live in a highly complex world. Things are changing, we know that. We need to work across organizations and across the sectors. In order to address systemic problems, we have to work systemically. And that means working across organizations and across sectors. The problem is, we often go about that all wrong. We approach these collaborative initiatives like we would any other organization, as a hierarchy with some central authority guiding the work, getting everybody under the same boat to row at the same speed and head in the exact same direction towards a predetermined outcome. Right? That's kind of what we've been trained in, most of us, in our work, in our lives for a long time. That's the structure to get things done. Kind of plan and execute, right? But that approach, number one, it only works if you already know what needs to get done and how to do it. That's not true in complex situations where things are constantly changing and you don't know the cause and effect of everything. It's also, it assumes that you actually have the authority to get everybody on the same boat, rowing at the same speed in the same direction. That's just not the case when we're working across organizations and power dynamics are all over the place. So when we're in these complex environments and addressing systemic issues, we need a different approach. The Cynefin framework from David Snowden and Mary Boone helps spell this out. We face different types of issues, and those different types of issues require a different response. So there are simple issues, which are definitively solvable. There's a clear beginning and end. It's like cooking a meal, solving a math problem. Then there are complicated issues, which have many moving parts. They're more technical in nature, and we can address them through planning and execution, like organizing an event or building a bridge. But then there are complex issues. There are no clear beginning or end. We can't predict the path ahead, and more emergent strategies are needed. These are things like stewarding a large landscape or increasing economic mobility or any host of things that you're here to address. And then there are chaotic issues, which are turbulent, dangerous, rapidly evolving, like navigating a sudden disaster or attack or a humanitarian crisis. Okay, so different types of issues. Simple issues, they can be solved or addressed by an individual, a person. Right? Complicated issues, organizations are extremely well suited to address complicated issues. They excel at that. Like hierarchical systems, great at addressing complicated issues. But complex issues, that requires multiple organizations working together over a sustained period of time. And then chaotic issues, that requires multiple organizations working together in a moment, at a moment's notice, to respond to the challenges and threats and opportunities as they emerge in real time. Okay, so simple issues, individuals, complicated issues, organizations, but then we need more of a network approach to address complex and chaotic issues. There are networks everywhere, as I said. We all form networks naturally. This has been happening since the beginning of humanity. It's in our nature to connect and collaborate. But now we can learn lessons from the most successful social movements in history. We can incorporate indigenous wisdom and other types of wisdom. And now we can also layer on new learnings from network science and systems thinking, and also new technologies and tools that enable us to coordinate at larger scales than ever before. So we are actually better positioned now at this point in history to create networks and collaborations that really work better than any other time in our existence. And again, those networks, so often they form kind of naturally, spontaneously, not as strategically and deliberately as they could. There's a key mindset shift that's necessary to form and work in these types of networks. Most of us, and myself included, the beginning of my career was all working in hierarchical systems. There's a boss, and there's chain of command, there's work that flows down, and so forth. But network is more of a decentralized way of working. So here's the key shift. Most organizations, most leaders tend to operate in their day-to-day with their own organization at the center of the universe. Right? And that makes sense for all the reasons we know. The organization's at the center. But the key shift here is to say, actually, if I dig down to get at kind of the root causes of the issues that we're trying to address, and what's underneath our mission statement, there's a deeper purpose there, and I'm not the sun at the center of the solar system. I'm actually one star in this constellation of other actors that also intersect with this shared issue. Right? So the purpose of the center, not your organization, is the center. And then what we need to do is to actually intentionally create connections and flows of information and learning and coordination between the different actors across that system around the shared purpose. This is what it means to build an impact network. Here's the thing though, we've spent the vast majority of our time and attention and energy and resources on supporting individual organizations, and very little time and attention and resources on investing in the system itself, the connections and information flow and coordination between those organizations. And not only does that yield outcomes that individual organizations can't do on their own, it actually strengthens the organizations that are in the system. Stronger systems lead to stronger organizations. So I believe, and hopefully you'll see examples in this book that convince you as well, that we need to invest not only in the organizations, that's super important, but also in the system within which those organizations live and work. All right, so what does it really look like when these networks are forming and evolving? Well, if you came into some given system, and you map the connections between the organizations, it would start out something like this: scattered fragments. Some organizations are connected, information is flowing between a few, by and large, scattered fragments, right? Scattered. So key first step is for someone, some organization, some funder or foundation are in a great position to do this, to see the opportunity for greater levels of connection and collaboration necessary between organizations, and to play an initial hub role and bring groups together for the first time. This is what's called a hub and spoke network. But very importantly, we can't stop here, because this is just creating another hierarchy. This is just creating another bottleneck. We need to continue to proliferate the connections between organizations, so information is flowing and resources are flowing between organization to organization without having to go through that centralized entity. And then over time, those connections continue to proliferate. It creates this dense core of activity, information flowing, resources flowing, coordination happening, and then it creates this gravitational force that brings other actors and other organizations in as well, into the periphery. It brings new ideas, new information, and so forth. So this is really what a healthy organizational system looks like. This is what we're going for. And that was kind of the theoretical approach, right? But we actually see this in practice over and over and over and over again when we build these networks. We can actually map the connections between organizations. This is from a network that I helped build, about 50 organizations working to advance economic mobility in New York City. So the dots, the nodes, that represents an organization. The color is the sector, and a connecting line in this case is high quality flow of information and data sharing between these organizations. So this was before, does this go up? Check, okay. This was before the network really started to form. You can see some organizations connected, by and large, fairly fragmented. And then over the first 3 months, you can see more and more connected, new actors are coming in, these purple dots is a new sector that was identified that needed to be engaged. And then we formed this core periphery, this really dense network, right? So strong system. The organizations are being more effective, they're learning from one another, they're finding ways to coordinate, reduce unnecessary duplication, and all the rest. So I talked about common patterns between how these networks form. These are the core activities of impact networks that we see over and over. We call them the 5 C's for memory and alliteration. But clarify purpose and principles, convene the people, cultivate trust, coordinate actions, and collaborate for systems change. And it's not like you just do one of these and check it off. You have to keep revisiting these over and over and over again throughout a network's life cycle. But let me go through these in brief using the example of the Santa Cruz Mountain Stewardship Network. This was a network that I helped form in 2015, and then I led the team of network participants to hire in full-time network leadership and coordination in 2017, and the network's still going strong over 10 years later. So why did it form? What was the purpose that connected it together? Well, in 2014, an initial group of organizations and funders came together and said, to take care of this land, 500,000 acres of land from San Francisco through San Jose, that necessarily requires a systemic response. We need to be more connected to do that. Because, think about it, if you get rid of all the invasive species on your land, but your neighbor hasn't done the same, it doesn't matter what you did. Same with preventing catastrophic wildfire, right? We have to look at the whole system and make a systemic response. So Those organizations did that, started bringing the groups together, and then we helped them identify shared principles. Principles are how you actually put values into action. A lot of times people come up with their shared values, and then it just becomes window dressing, it's just words on a wall. It's like, how are we going to actually hold each other accountable to those values and use those values to guide our decisions and our actions? That's what principles are. That's why principles are important. And in the case of this network, the key principles were, what does good land stewardship look like from the perspective of these organizations that guided their actions and decisions over the coming years? Then as you start to identify why we need to come together, it's easier and easier to identify who needs to be involved. And so in the case of the Santa Cruz network, it's the major landowners and land managers across the region. So that included the largest government agencies like Bureau of Land Management, state agencies like California State Parks, local agencies, county resource or conservation districts, as well as land trusts and the region's largest tribal group and the region's largest timber company and academic institutions. A lot of these people didn't like each other or didn't trust each other, had really different ideas, but they're all in the same system together, so they recognize there's a need to actually come together and coordinate more effectively. So Adrienne Marie Brown talks about who we convene. We convene people who, number one, are doing compelling work on the issue, number two, can impact the issue, number three, can move the issue forward. Are impacted by the issue, and number three, can move the issue forward. And when we're convening people in the network, this is also important for funders, especially as the catalyst role, bringing people together the first time. When you invite people in, it's not inviting them into your thing, right? It's inviting them into the collective, into co-creating what's possible together now that they're part of the network. But then we cultivate trust. This is very important. But we don't build trust so that we like each other. We actually don't need to like each other to be able to work together. We definitely don't build trust so that we agree with one another. It's actually so that we can disagree, so that we can have the hard conversations that we need to have, maybe find a slice of common ground where we do agree and can work together, or at least have enough goodwill so that we can keep coordinating, keep communicating through the disagreements, through the miscommunications. And believe it or not, trust can actually be developed maybe more quickly than you might expect. We can go about it deliberately. There's a whole chapter in the book about how we cultivate trust with examples. We go, just like building networks deliberately, we can cultivate trust deliberately as well. It doesn't just have to be a byproduct of the social interactions that these folks have. And we coordinate actions, because on the road to systems change, which is a long road, it's very hard, it takes time, we can do things now that strengthen the system. In terms of, let's look at what's happening already, all the good work that these organizations are already doing, how can we support that work right now? By reducing unnecessary duplication, by learning from one another's efforts, by sharing resources when appropriate, by coordinating when appropriate. So those types of quick wins really help demonstrate the value of the network immediately to network participants. And it keeps bringing them back because their work, their organizational and individual priorities are being supported by their engagement in the network, on the road to the bigger things that they might want to do together aspirationally, which is systems change. And when we're thinking about how to create systems change, we need to bring all of our pieces of the puzzle together, because organizations are focused on different pieces of the puzzle. They have a limited set of information. Complex issues affect people very differently. And start to identify some leverage points, as Danilo Meadows said, places in the system where a shift in one thing can produce big changes in everything. In the case of the Santa Cruz network, that was reducing unnecessarily burdensome permitting practices for important ecological restoration work, as well as pooling their data together for the first time to create this region-wide vegetation map, which enabled them to look at the whole landscape and strategically reduce the risk of catastrophic wildfire. We could go about identifying leverage points in different ways, but I just want to highlight one example from 100K in 10, which I mentioned before, 100,000 STEM educators in 10 years. They created a systems map. They interviewed hundreds of academic educators and administrators and experts and asked them, why is this so hard? And then how do those challenges relate to one another? And they created this map of challenges. And they have an awesome interactive display on their website, 100kn10.org. And they identify some key clusters where they could go after and actually make progress on this really wicked issue. Things like instructional materials, or increasing the value of STEM, or teacher leadership, professional growth, elementary STEM, and more. Okay, so Tips for network funders. What is the funder's role in all this? Well, as I mentioned, funders are in a really great position to be a catalyst, to help networks get started by recognizing the need for a systemic approach and bringing organizations together in the first place. But again, importantly, don't stop at the hub stage. Make sure it's not just organizations connected through you, the funder. You have to create the conditions and the space for organizations to connect, to learn, to coordinate together, to do things they can and want to do together. And on that road, these are all number one, because they're all equally important. One. Follow the network's lead. Support the network without controlling it or predetermining its outcomes. This is a challenge sometimes for funders. I'm not going to lie. I often think because they're bringing the money that they have some special authority with respect to the network, where they can set the outcomes before people have had a chance to get together and figure it out for themselves. Sometimes, I think it's somewhat rational to think that we're helping lead the network and it's going to go faster because we're getting everybody to do this thing together. But again, that's the approach of getting everybody on the same boat and trying to get them row at the same speed in the same direction. That works in complicated issues. It doesn't work in complex issues. Instead, we need to bring folks together to help clarify that shared purpose, help get the right people in the room. Funders are in a great position to help create the spaces, and they also have the draw to get organizations together in the first place. But then the role is to move from catalyst to a peer and provide support so the network can discover what it can and want to do together and give it the support that it needs. I'll talk about network leadership on the next slide. But on the path, engage as peers. Work alongside the network as equal partners, not above it or separate from it. And meanwhile, take the long view, because again, systems change takes time, but in the short term, we can create healthier systems right now. We can prioritize connection, learning, and coordination in the short term. And funders also need to support network leaders, the people at the heart of these initiatives. That, again, network leaders so often are what makes the difference. But they're usually so humble and so quick to share the credit that we rarely ever know who they are. So it's a big part of my personal mission to help raise the profile of these network leaders. And there's different types of roles that network leaders play. There's catalyzing, as I mentioned before, bringing groups together for the first time. That may be at a convening, it might be around a specific project or around a specific issue or just even a topic of conversation, but catalyzing some type of action. There's a big leadership role. But then weaving, intentionally creating connections between individuals and organizations, especially where there's an opportunity for mutual benefit. And some people are natural born leaders, but they need to be supported to do that work. Then facilitation. Bad facilitation can ruin a meeting, truly. But good facilitation can break through. It can create all the difference, even when people disagree and hate each other, but find a way to start to coordinate and work together. So good facilitation, absolutely essential. And then coordination is all the back of the house, all the behind the scenes, the infrastructure, the backbone, the technological systems, a lot of the stuff that's sort of invisible, that if you don't notice it, it means it's going really well. But if it's not going well, you will notice it. Really important role, coordination. Now, we're going to get to Q&A. I just want to leave you with a couple of metaphors that might help crystallize this. So we're not trying to get everybody on the same boat, to row in the same direction towards a predetermined outcome. That's for complicated issues. It's more kind of like creating a flotilla of kayaks. Because organizations in these networks and collaboratives, each organization is autonomous. They control their own vessel. But we can go farther together than we can alone if we share information, if we stay connected, we share resources. Not a single boat, more like a flotilla. We're not building a bridge from point A to point B. The book is written to be a guide, but it's not like step 1, 2, 3, and then you're done, check. It's not like the same blueprint for every network. It's more like cultivating a garden. You can't force plants to grow in a certain direction or like make them grow faster by yelling at them or something. Or you can till the soil, you can provide pollinators, you can plant the seeds, you can even provide a creative structure in terms of trellises and stakes and so forth. So we're not building bridges, we're cultivating gardens. And then networks are living systems, so they take a lot of inspiration from how nature works. Right? So end up becoming these beautiful swirling collectives that change shape and adapt in real time, like a murmuration of starlings, if you've seen that in the sky. They're made up of individual actors, but the whole system stays connected through communication. And as a result, something greater than the sum of the parts emerges. Okay, last thing. If you take anything away from this and you're not sure how to proceed, invest in relationships. Because, as Janeway Skiller, a researcher, has found, the single most important factor behind all successful collaborations is trust-based relationships among participants. And many collaborative efforts ultimately fail to reach their full potential because they lack that strong relational foundation. A lot of times people are like, when are we going to get to action? Let's do the thing, let's get to action. Before they've even had the opportunity to have conversations and actually build some degree of trust and shared understanding. The problem is if we jump straight to action too quickly, then it's just likely to break down whenever we have a miscommunication or a disagreement, which is always, we're always going to have this. If we're doing important work, we're always going to have miscommunications and disagreements. So building trust is the work, and it helps to propel all the action that's going to happen. So think of it like a return on relationships, ROR, right? Invest in relationships. Again, networks, they're just webs of relationships connecting people or things. So networks are as strong as relationships that hold them together. So we have open sourced everything that we've learned at Converge. So there's tons of free tools on the website at converge.net/toolkit and in the book. I hope you'll take a copy. And you can always reach out to me. Happy to answer any questions now and in the future. My email is my last name, Aerlichman at converge.net. All right, thank you, everybody. So happy to take, how much time do we have for questions? 8 minutes for questions. You and then you, yeah.
Sorry, you talked about the...
We're going to have a mic floating around you. There, thanks.
Sorry. You talked about the fact that it was wonderful if you could have a boat where you had 5 or 6 people that were all rowing in the same direction at equal pace. There's something, for me, that's the theory. In reality, you have something that always comes in the way, and it's called ego. And I know that companies like Shittufim, whose leadership doesn't have any ego, it's easy to work with them and the 5 or 6 people are the same like-minded, then it would grow in the same direction. But I think that one of the ways to be able to, or correct me if I'm wrong, one of the ways to address that ego that comes in the way and that you stumble upon is to share responsibilities in different categories and to identify clearly different types of activities of which one person will be responsible and accountable for, and to share those things. And like this, you can have everybody more or less rowing in their own little cubicle, but in the same direction.
Sure, thank you, yeah. It's a nice point. And it brings me to an important point, which is a lot of times in these types of collaboratives, we bring people together and then we just spend all of our time focusing on the shared aspiration that brings us together. That makes sense, right? But the reality is, we can have a lot of great conversations and aspirations and big goals, but then we get back on Monday to our day job, and we have a full email inbox, and we're overwhelmed with our organizational priorities, and those big aspirations kind of are like secondary. We don't really get to them, right? So, we're coming together around this kind of collective purpose, but let's not forget, let's be really real, that we also have our individual purposes as people, and then we have our organizational purposes and priorities and our constituents. And participating in a network can't just be like another extra thing that doesn't serve your individual or organizational priorities. The work of the network also has to serve the individual and organizational priorities of those who are involved. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to participate. So when it comes to distributing roles and things like that to get things done, let's connect those with the organizational priorities that those folks already have. The organizations need to be aligned with the intentions of the network in terms of the specific projects and actions that they're taking. Otherwise, they won't be able to invest the time that's necessary. Thank you.
Hi, David. Lisa Tabak from the Bay Area, working in the Federation for a long time, and I work with a lot of funders and Yes, my question really is about duplication. And there's just so much duplication. I want to say especially in Israel, and especially post-October 7th. So every organization is focusing on trauma and PTSD. And so I don't know of any networks that are going on or any kind of collaborations around that. I just know that each of these organizations reaches out to me to find funding. And I would love to hear some, I don't know, I guess sage advice on how to deal with duplication in a network.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the harder issues when folks get together and they realize a lot of us are doing the same thing, which is beautiful in a lot of ways, because then we can learn from one another and so forth. But then it's like, do we all need to be doing the same thing? No, probably not. This is where good facilitation is absolutely essential. But at the same time, when they kind of get together and bring their different pieces of the pie, you might realize that this issue, you say trauma, PTSD, there's a lot of nuance in that issue, and these organizations will probably have different experiences with it and are focused on different slivers of this massive issue. And so even though they're all focused on what appears to be a same issue, I think if you brought them together and had conversations between them on what they're learning and the specific ways that they're approaching it, you might recognize that there's actually kind of like a larger, more diverse system of different approaches and different groups or populations or regions and so forth that in which they're addressing it or could address it. And so I would get those different groups together and actually kind of map the system of trauma and PTSD across whatever geography or population that they're focused on. And what are all the factors that influence it? What are the root causes of that? And of those root causes, who's addressing which of these different root causes? And let's kind of look at the big picture, and see how we're distributing our efforts to get at the individual root causes that are leading to the symptoms that we're seeing, and not just addressing the symptoms.
And I'm just gonna step in for just a minute. I'm gonna take a minute. There are a few great examples that are happening in Israel today that do already collectively bring together different actors in different areas, both in rehabilitation and trauma and PTSD. And one of the great examples that are happening now is with Parenthood in the north of Israel, to kind of help all the organizations that are trying to help the parents be better parents and help their children kind of build their resilience in the north after 2 years of being refugees and going all over Israel and coming back to the north. It had a lot of challenges, and that's one of the great examples that are happening today. And there's many other examples that I could give, but that was just one that I wanted to share. Thanks.
We have time for one or two more questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Roswell raised one of the important issues of ego, and I agree your response was absolutely very helpful. One of the other challenges I find with impact networking is around money, which you didn't really speak about. Because I think a lot of our networks are formed, at some point with an intention of either distributing resources or accessing resources, often or sometimes initiated by people who are unequal in terms of what they're bringing to the table, and it creates an imbalance. And it is an issue of trust, but also power. So I just was wondering what your experience has been, and if you could speak a little bit to that in order to make a network as effective as possible when not all the players are in an equal place.
Absolutely. Power is always present whether we speak of it or not. And let's talk about it. There's a section of the book on addressing power dynamics in the network, because it's always present. And in the Santa Cruz network that I mentioned before, there are organizations of totally different size and levels of influence in the region, from the California state parks down to small agencies and small groups, or the huge land trusts who have tons of money, and then the local, the smaller land trusts or nonprofits that have little. And so we talked about it. This is where good facilitation, again, comes into play. Like, we actually need to be able to address these issues and have conversations about them and recognize where power is getting in the way and where it's something that can be acknowledged but doesn't need to be addressed. right now. There's, I think, a difference between acknowledging and addressing. Some issues just need to be acknowledged, the elephant in the room, let's recognize it and be aware, and so that when it does show up in a place that's detrimental to our progress, it's a point of conversation, it's not taboo. But perhaps there are also things that can be acknowledged that don't need to be addressed in that moment. And addressed as in needs to be solved because it's the way the system is now, and that's not our primary focus at the moment. So don't want to push power to the side, and hopefully this section of the book is illustrative. And Interaction Institute for Social Change has done a lot of great work on this, so the book points to their resources as well. Maybe one more. Okay.
Thank you. I'm curious, you talked about the unique role that philanthropists and foundations have to be the catalyst, and I'm curious, you talked about the challenge or the opportunity of moving into network leadership and coordination. Can you talk a little more about what that looks like and maybe give an example of a role that you've seen a funder or foundation do, what that looks like?
Totally. So I've seen funders engage with the network in lots of different ways. So the catalyst is a great role, seeing the opportunity, bringing folks together, and that means creating the space and sort of the invitation to get groups together, and also bringing in high quality facilitation to support that work. Sometimes funders try to take on that role themselves and sort of bake in the different network leadership roles within their foundation. That requires a high level of skill and experience. And I don't recommend it for the first time necessarily, unless you've had experience with working in collaboratives. But it can work. I'm working with a foundation right now, the Ginsberg Family Foundation in Central Florida, that is providing the backbone for the Central Florida Pledge. And they're aware of the difficulties with being a funder and being in that role, because as, for example, a facilitator or a coordinator, it's important that you are incredibly neutral for the most part, and able to build a degree of trust with the participants in the room. So not all foundations can do that, but some can. If you can't, you can be a catalyst, but then kind of move into more of I'm a participant in the network. I'm not the leader of the network, but I'm part of the network, but we are providing support and resources to fulfill the different levels of network, or the different roles of network leadership found here, weaving, facilitation, and coordination. And so lots of funders, the Santa Cruz network and the New York network I mentioned, the funder provides resources to fulfill the network leadership roles, but then they're a part of the network because funders are a part of the system. We're not separate from the system. You're a part of the system as well with the other organizations. So bring in your expertise on the issue, be part of the conversation, the discussion, help to identify the points of leverage and everything else. You don't need to direct it, but you can absolutely should, I think, bring your expertise and be part of it. Be part of the collaboration while also supporting it.
We're going to take one more question. Sorry, where's that next one? One last question, and then we'll move on.
Hi, I'm Julie Arden. So you spoke quite eloquently about donors creating a network and facilitating the space. I think it also can happen from the other end, where in the climate space we've seen a certain cause and an organization created around that cause crowd many donors together. Rather than the donors crowding the technical specialists have crowded the donors. For example, the Climate Leadership Initiative or Climate Works. Can you speak to that kind of similar but opposite dynamic?
In terms of the organizations kind of being the catalyst?
Who takes the lead, and how could perhaps several donors come together to create the mechanism to help them organize together?
Yeah, so I've seen it go both ways. Sometimes a group of funders get together, as in the Civic Science Collaborative is a group of funders together that sparked a nationwide effort around community access to science. And then it's a group of funders kind of acting as what I call a core team, which is a group that helps kind of design the network, doesn't force it or direct it, kind of designing the future of the network, but with help lightly, right? So that you start to shape, what's the purpose here, who are the groups that we need to get involved, and that those decisions are fairly distributed from the initial group. But again, then that group doesn't hold on to control. The other way is that organizations see the need and then go to funders and say, we're in this space, we recognize the need for this kind of level of connectivity and collaboration. And I have found in my experience that funders are often looking for organizations to collaborate well, but the funder doesn't always want to be the one to catalyze the effort. And so we have very often helped groups as the initial organizations getting together to find some common agreements and create some kind of shared principles. And in the case of the Santa Cruz Network, for example, those organizations met together for an initial year, and that was the only commitment they made at the beginning, which brings me to another important point about time bounding. That it shortened the commitment length for organizations engaging these networks to a period of time, like 6 months or a year at the beginning. Because otherwise it's going to be indefinite. And it's like, I can't commit indefinitely to this thing where I don't know what's going. But you can say, okay, we're going to commit to a year to see how much agreement we can find, how far we can go. And in that case, they developed a memorandum of understanding that said, this work is important, here's kind of our baseline principles around it, and here are the key issues that we see that we want to address. But they use that to then generate a grant for another 3 years from multiple funders. And then in that process, that also catalyzed the funders having to collaborate with one another. So from the organizations, but with a bit more clarity around why they actually and how they can collaborate.
Thank you. Thank you, David, for joining us. I want to give one more example for the question that you asked. And in Israel, there is an initiative called Drawing the Lines of Intimate Partner Violence, and there's a fund of different funders that came together in order to help the whole network do the work that they decided to do together, and to give specific funds to different initiatives within the network that work together to achieve the common agenda, the common goals that they build. I can elaborate about it after. So I want to share with you a short video. Started.
באופן כללי, הסיפור של שותפויות, גם בתפיסת עולם של הקרן, מאוד מאוד מרכזי. קרן פילנתרופית יודעת לייצר פיילוטים, לעשות משהו חדשני, לקחת סיכום, לעשות משהו קטן, לבדוק אם הוא עובד. אבל לעשות מהלך שהוא לאומי, אז זה משהו שצריך פה לכל השותפים. הסיפור של השותפות בא בעיקר כשאתה רוצה לעשות מהלך גדול, או שכבר יש לך פיילוט שהצלחת. אבל הערך הנוסף של העבודה המשותפת, הוא באמת בתהליכים ארוכי טווח.
מאוד מאמינים בשותפויות, בטח בבעיות מורכבות, בליצור שינוי של בעיות מורכבות, בואו נהיה צנועים, אף אחד לא יביא את השינוי לבד. אז ברעיון השותפות היא כלי מאוד מאוד מרכזי. יחד עם זה, אנחנו מאוד מאוד עסוקים באיך לבנות שותפויות באופן אפקטיבי, איך בסוף השותפות לא הופכת להיות המטרה, היא האמצעי כדי להגיע לשינוי. זה מצריך איזו התרוממות מעבר לאיך כל ארגון רואה את הבעיה בשדה. הוא מתאים כשאנחנו רוצים ללכת לפתרון ארוך טווח, ושניסינו הרבה פתרונות קטנים, והם פחות אפקטיביים, שהפתרונות הם בדרך כלל לא יושבים בסקטור אחד. אני חושבת שאולי זה גם עוד אלמנט שהוא משמעותי, שבאמת אנחנו רוצים להניע את תהליך שינוי שהוא חוצה מגזרים.
אנחנו חושבים שזאת שיטת עבודה מאוד חשובה ומשמעותית, והיא נותנת פלטפורמת עבודה ממש מיוחדת ובאמת חשובה, אם כל פעם נבחרים נושאים שהם משמעותיים לחברה, וכולם יושבים מסביב לשולחן ונותנים את כל מה שיש להם כדי לבנות משהו.
צרכים של הקהילה היהודית המקומית, הארצית והבינלאומית הם מגוונים. הם רחבים היקף יותר ממה שכל פילנתרופ או קהילה בודדת יכולה לתת לזה מענה, וחייבים לעבוד בשיתוף פעולה כקולקטיב. בקולקטיב אימפקט יש הבנה שאין שחקן אחד שיש לו את כל התשובות, ואפילו לא את כל השאלות, שצריך את החוכמה של ההמון הרלוונטי לסוגיה שעומד באמצע העבודה על סוגיה מסוימת, על מנת ללמוד את זה ממש ב-360 מעלות, ולנסות לזהות את הגורמים שיכולים גם לתרום להבנת הסוגיה וגם לתרום למתן פתרון.
So the introduction to the video was a few perspectives of philanthropic leaders from Israel that work together in different collaborations and collective impact in Israel. There's going to be another two short videos shortly that keep the perspective of philanthropy and cross-sector collaborations. I want to thank David again for joining us, and as he said, there's his books here, and you're more than welcome to come and collect them. So now we're going to work together a bit with the tool that you have in front of you. So the tool is a triangle. The triangle is equilateral on purpose. There's results and processes and relationships. The results is why the collaboration started in the first place. What is their common goal? How do we know what the common goal is? How do we get together and learn and analyze correctly the social issue that we're trying to work on together? And what will the change look like? What will change in the lives of the people that are affected? What will change in the system? What do we need exactly to do, and how does it look like? And what are the indicators that we know are getting us there, so that we won't only measure it and evaluate it at the end. We kind of need to know during the process whether we're on the right path, or do we need to pivot, or do we need to change anything? And that's the results part. The other two parts are processes and relationships, and they're equally important because they're what makes the partnership happen and how we can get together to achieve that shared common agenda and our goals. And so the processes are what mechanisms do we build to support the partnership and to help the resource flow, to help the information flow, and to help all of the partners work together. And the relationships, as David said before, is really the most delicate part. It's usually something we don't see. It's very often something we don't measure. But what relationships look like inside the network? How do we build the trust inside the network? How do we effectively promote the shared responsibility of the different actors inside our networks in order to achieve our shared goals? So this tool we use to also plan and architect different sorts of partnerships, and also that we can evaluate them. And we use it so that we can really identify what our goals and what the things that we want to achieve in all three of the different points of the triangle. So as you see in front of you, you each have an envelope with the questions that we just ran on. And we're gonna do a short exercise together. And I want you to think about a partnership that maybe you're part of already, or that you want to initiate, you want to start. You're starting to plan it in your head, and you really want to make it happen. And try to analyze just for a minute with yourself that specific partnership, and really think about what can be the main challenges of the partnership. What are the strengths? What do we need to do now to make the partnership better in the near future? And share one insight with the people in your table. We don't have a lot of time because the last part went a bit longer. So we have about 10 to 15 minutes so let each one in your table share at least one insight from their partnership that they did. I'm going to share a short video with you before we start, and then we're going to start.
פילנתרופיה היא לוקחת לעצמה בעצם איזושהי אחריות וסמכות שאף אחד לא נתן. אבל אני חושבת שהתפקיד שלנו בעיקר הוא דווקא בגלל שיש לנו את הפריבילגיה לא להתעסק לעכשיו לספק את השירות הזה או האחר, אלא לקחת צעד אחד, להתרומם, לחקור סוגיות, להבין את החסמים המרכזיים, להבין מה הצירים המרכזיים גם שיביא לשינוי. הפריבילגיה הזאת, קצת לחשוב מחוץ למערכות, מאפשרת לנו, אני חושבת, גם להציע כל מיני פתרונות, וגם להניע כל מיני תהליכים. התפקיד שלנו מאוד מאוד משתנה, ואנחנו כן בגדול עושים את עצמנו ביותר בתהליכים קטליטיים, או בתהליכים שהם יכולים ליצור שינוי, אבל לפעמים אנחנו גם לפעמים אנחנו בהגה, ולפעמים אנחנו במקום שלו אחורי.
Governments can react, but philanthropy can anticipate. אז פה יש הזדמנויות רבות לפילנתרופיה להביא דברים חדשניים, רעיונות חדשים שעוד לא היו בנוף הישראלי, למצב שהגענו ל-proof of concept, כדי לא לשפוך כסף על רעיון, על חלום, על חזון, זה להגיד אנחנו עובדים באופן שיטתי, לבחור מקומות שבהם יש את הפוטנציאל להשפיע על סוגיה, להיכנס ואפילו לפעמים להסתכן. אנחנו מוכנים לפעמים לסכן את הכספים הפילנתרופיים על מנת להגיע לקצה השני של המנהרה ולראות שבאמת יש מודל שיכול להצדיק השקעה לאורך זמן של הממשלה ושל הממשלה.
בוויז'ן שלי אני רואה את המדינה כמו משחקת גדולה שנוסעת לאיזושהי קואורדינטה ידועה מראש, עם תקציב ידוע מראש שנה כבר קודם, והפילנתרופיה זה הסירות הקטנות שיוצאות ובאות כדי לעזור לאותה משחקת להגיע למחוז חפצה.
באופן מסורתי, בסוף, התפקיד של הפילנתרופיה הוא היכולת לעבוד יותר מהר, יותר גמיש, לקחת סיכונים יותר גדולים וליזום. והפילנתרופיה צריכה להיות במקומות של החדשנות תמיד, ובמקומות של לבדוק משהו חדש, להוכיח את ההתכנות שלו, ואז לראות איך מייצרים לו את המודל הססטיינבילי.
So we have about 12 minutes, so you can start your discussions now. Thank you.